I'm Ed Kowalewski. I am the lightweight in this group. I'm part of the CIBA Center here, and again, let me thank the sponsors for both their generous financial donations, but also the donations of time to allow us at CIBA to put this panel together and do some of the work at CIBA that you'll hear about a little bit more this afternoon. In energy storage, there is an alphabet of organizations. You've heard ESD, you've heard NYSERDA, you've heard IM3, and you'll probably hear a litany of other acronyms and organizations. So I think probably the first thing that I'd like to do is allow our panelists to tell us a little bit about their organizations, frankly, just so that you can understand the acronym. But frankly, a key takeaway is that you know not just the people, but you know what they do. So when they begin to respond to your questions, it'll give you a sort of frame of reference. We've got Bill Acker this morning from NY BEST, another acronym for, he's the executive director for New York Battery Energy Storage Consortium. Craig Connelly from NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. A dinner partner that I had last night, Chaitanya Sharma. He's the CEO of IM3NY. So those are the acronyms. The overall sort of bridge is energy storage as a bridge to the future, but maybe starting with Bill. Tell us a little bit about New York BEST, what it is you do, and how that leads to this bridge that we're talking about.
Thanks, Ed. Excuse me. So I'm Bill Acker. I'm the executive director of New York BEST, and the BEST in New York BEST is not an aggrandizement. It stands for Battery and Energy Storage Technology. And we work on batteries, of course, with the battery part, but and energy storage also indicates that our organization works on green hydrogen, fuel cells, other forms of storage as well. But a major part of our focus is on batteries and advancing the battery industry. So our mission is to advance the energy storage industry and to make New York State a leader in energy storage. We are a nonprofit industry trade organization, about 180 member organizations, mostly companies. They range from little two-person startups to global leaders. We do a lot of work to advance the industry in New York State. So that has a number of components to it. One is we work on the regulatory and policy pieces. Some of that was brought up in the earlier and some of the answers you heard earlier about regard to some of the challenges with the market rules, with the policy rules, et cetera. We also work a lot to advance and help small companies in incubating and accelerating small companies. We have a testing laboratory in Rochester, New York at the Eastman Business Park, where we do a third-party independent testing. We own the laboratory, and D&B operates that laboratory for us to do testing, to do third-party validation, and critically, a lot of the safety testing, because safety is very, very important in this industry. We need to get that right. Stan mentioned earlier the challenges in developing the manufacturing industry in the United States. Our organization is one of the 3 convening organizations with the Federal Public-Private Partnership for Advancing the Lithium Battery Industry called LIBRIDGE. We just had a meeting yesterday on that in Chicago. And there's a major emphasis where we're bringing forward all of these challenges and creating a pathway to address them. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what's happening in this space. We need, as Stan very articulately pointed out, we need this to happen to make our clean energy future happen. And we are in an incredible position to both achieve amazing effects on the environment, on positive effects on the environment, and also the economic growth and revitalization of upstate New York as part of this.
Craig, you want to talk a little bit about NYSERDA?
Hello all. My name is Craig Connelly. I'm the Director of Research and Development in the Innovation Division of NYSERDA. So a little bit about NYSERDA. There's multiple divisions that focus on different areas. My division focuses on the traditional R&D and tech-to-market aspects of our mission. There's other parts of NYSERDA that work on deployment of technology, rebate programs, direct customer interactions and education and things like that. There's other pieces of NYSERDA that work on large-scale renewable energy deployment projects, transmission lines. It's a sort of an end-to-end one-stop shop, if you will, in terms of a public benefit corporation that covers every aspect of how we interact with energy. We're very lucky to have a pretty significant budget. The budget comes from sort of a rate-based fee on everybody's electricity bills. So it's very important that what we do has a net positive benefit to all energy consumers in the state. So we have this really important mission. We have some funding to move that mission along. And we're very grateful to have such a great ecosystem of partners here in the Southern Tier and across the state that really kind of are excited about our mission, are energized to help us deploy these technologies. And it's a great time to think about how we shape our future, how we want our, I have a young daughter, she's 9 months old, and when I go to work every day, I think about what type of world do I want her to go to high school in, to go to college in. And that's what gets us all out of bed every morning and gets us excited at NYSERDA to go work on this mission. So I'm excited to be here today to join this amazing panel and talk about what we're going to do in storage to make that happen. Thank you so much.
And last but not least, the CEO of Imperium.
Hi, I'm Chaitanya. I'm the CEO for Imperium 3 New York. That's what that acronym stands for. Our mission is to power the world's transition to clean energy now and for many life cycles. So Professor Whittingham gave a little bit of an introduction for us, but we are a gigafactory, so I just wanted to, for the benefit of everybody, a gigafactory is essentially an entity that can create battery cells that can store more than 1 gigawatt hour of energy per year. So that's how a gigafactory gets defined. So we are putting together this factory within the Huron campus, and our production will lead us to cross that 1 gigawatt hour production. But in all honesty, I mean, it's a big effort that we are taking to get to that gigawatt hour level. But if you look at it from a market standpoint, there are many announcements of factories around the country, mostly from Asian manufacturers, and they're all announcing really big factories and double-digit and even triple-digit gigawatt hours. And so the industry, the demand for these lithium-ion cells have been very steep, and that's not lost on us. So although we are starting out with this 1 gigawatt hour capacity, we have all the plans to expand our production to many more gigawatt hours. And to the message that Professor Whittingham said, we need maybe 5 or 6 factories here. We would love to be the people to have that capacity all coming from Imperium 3 New York. But I'm very glad to be here and talk about a very critical mission, which is how do we take energy storage and make it be part of a transition to clean future, and we'd love to share our views on that.
So the overall topic again is energy storage as the bridge to a clean energy future. We're ready to entertain questions from the audience, but let me start the panel by simply why do we need this bridge? I mean, and what are the technologies that are going to allow us to build the foundation of the bridge and get us to the point where we have clean energy.
Is it okay if I start? So I want us all to think back to the very first time a human thought about what they were going to eat for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. When the first person went out and gathered some berries and said, okay, I'm not going to gather berries every morning for breakfast, I'm going to store some up. That is the reason storage is so important. There are very few systems in our entire built human environment that do not take advantage of a storage methodology. When we start asking questions about what's so special about renewable energy and why does it need storage, right? Every other conventional form of energy that we work with has some form of storage, whether it's a cord of wood that's cut and split and sitting in your front yard so that you can start a fire when you need it, to a pile of coal that's getting ready to be shoveled into some sort of industrial process or electricity generation process. Storage is instrumental and unique and inseparable from our human experience with energy. We can't think of one system that doesn't have a storage component in it. Think about our food chain, right? We don't go and pick eggs every morning to make an omelet. I had a nice 2-egg sandwich this morning. It was amazing. But I didn't walk out and go shake up a chicken to find it, right? So why do we think about why storage is so weird and different and alien when we talk about our experience with renewable energy? It is a key component of every sort of system that we interact with humans. And I think that's the kind of the long and short of why we need storage, right? It would be silly not to include a storage component when we start to think about shifting our energy needs. And how we get there, there's a tremendous amount of technology opportunities. I like to think about this concept of what I call an ideal technology profile, right? There is an ideal technology for all sorts of different sort of areas, right? Whether it's a battery, whether it's a pile of wood, those sorts of things are all different ways to store energy. And I think the challenge is not why do we need storage, but how do we pick the best technology to meet the use case of what we need to store energy for. It's a tremendous challenge. There's a lot of people thinking about all those different use scenarios and how we do it. And I'm thinking Bill's ready to jump in here to say this is exactly how we solve this problem. But when I wake up and I think about storage, those are the things I think about. Is this is just a normal thing? We should be storing stuff, whether it's for a rainy day or it's for the period of time in California where they're generating so much solar electricity that they can't use it at that time and they want to use it 6 hours later. This is just a normal human thing to make sure that we have the ability to store our resources and use them wisely. So I'll kind of pause there and see what others think. But see it as just a normal thing.
Well, I guess
Sorry about
that's good. So I normally am ready to jump in there, but I wanted Craig to keep going. I thought that was an excellent answer. So but with that said, I think to build on it, we absolutely need storage, and it shouldn't be thought of as differently, as Craig just said. And one of the things we need to ask ourselves is, what do we actually need? Because when you get to a decarbonized grid, we're going to need a lot more storage than most people think. We're going to need to have a lot of storage that is going to smooth out the very rapid fluctuations on the grid of a cloud goes over a solar panel at periodic dips. We're going to need a lot of storage that is going to shift diurnally of being able to take solar power from the afternoon and run the lights at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then we're also going to need a lot of storage that is going to make up the gaps of the few days in January when the wind powers are blowing and there's a snowstorm and you've got no sun, and now you've got, I need 3 days of storage. So there's a whole range here that we're going to need. And just to put this in scale, the estimates that we're seeing from the modeling is showing that we need about the amount of storage that we have as capacity on the grid today in the form of these longer and shorter terms. So we need levels of storage that are similar to the levels of offshore wind, similar to the levels of solar. So one of the things that our organization is constantly beating the drum about is we've got to understand that and get moving on those programs at the rate that we're getting moving at the programs on the renewable energy, because we need both of them in order to solve our problems. But with that said, I don't want to focus entirely on the grid, because we need storage, obviously, for electric vehicles, and there's a huge opportunity here, and this is going to be a phenomenally large industry.
Yeah, so I'll also share my views on this. So energy storage, my analogy is not as cool as Greg's about the eggs and the omelet, but energy storage essentially is you need to be able to store energy and then use it when you feel the need to use it. And particularly energy storage, in my views, you either solve for availability or economics when you store energy. Availability, when you have solar and wind, those are intermittent sources of energy, and so you need to have an ability to store them when they are available in abundance and then use them in the night time or when they're not there. And then sometimes they're used for economics because the electricity prices are pretty high during the day, and so you store energy during night time. And there are many different forms of these applications. So I've also spent some time in the HVAC industry, which is basically the building conditioning, and campus conditioning. So many times you use thermal energy storage systems, which is essentially prices are high during the daytime, so you use your chillers to make cold chilled water during the night time, and then use it in the daytime when prices are higher, and so running those chillers are expensive. So there's many forms of energy storage that people have thought about, but particularly to transition to clean energy, and there's lots of research happening on many different angles to clean energy. There's also some that may not necessarily even need energy storage, like if you have a nuclear power plant that sometimes people claim is clean energy, then you may have abundance of energy and you may eliminate the need for storage. But I think the more relevant one for our times is the renewable energy sources, solar and wind projects that are being deployed several places in the globe. And for those to be a reliable source of energy, you definitely need some form of a storage. There are many different kinds of technologies even within the storage. Batteries obviously are leading the front on that, and even batteries in themselves have different kind of technologies. There are flow batteries, there are iron air batteries, and of course I come from Imperium 3, so I'll talk about lithium ion maybe a bit more. And even within lithium ion, there are two different kinds of chemistries. One that use nickel and cobalt, very popular terms these days. Commodity markets are seeing sky high prices for them. And there's another chemistry which does not need nickel and cobalt. And what we make at IM3 New York is a no nickel, no cobalt chemistry, which in my views is more tailor-made for clean energy and energy storage versus the nickel and cobalt. So when you put nickel and cobalt inside the cell, you increase the energy density, which perhaps is needed more for the car industry. That's also debatable, but maybe they need that range, and so you need those nickel and cobalt elements. But for energy storage, you can make your battery system slightly bigger, but if they're more safer, they're more cheaper and more longer lasting, then those are the better technology to deploy for energy storage. So I think there's lots of research and lots of maturity that is coming in the industry, but I think lithium-ion batteries to support the transition to clean energy is definitely going to continue. And in my view, phosphate chemistries which have no nickel and no cobalt will dominate that sector.
Perfect. We're almost at that point where we can either raise some hands and again ask some questions of our panelists. Do you have anybody that would question in the back?
I don't probably need a microphone, but I can wait for it.
It's on its way out.
All right. Yeah, I really enjoyed your analogies, Craig, around storage. And this question is primarily for you, I think. And it may seem a little odd because it's about hydrogen. Although from the look on your face, you've had these before. You're probably aware that a lot of scientists, advocates, policy people are profoundly concerned about the use case creep of hydrogen proposals. Without going into detail, you're aware of the shortcomings of using hydrogen for heating or for power generation in terms of efficiencies, cost, and safety. And that hydrogen really is best used, green hydrogen, to replace black hydrogen for manufacturing. And I guess what I'm hoping to hear from you is this is what New York State is up to. That we're not talking about putting hydrogen in pipelines. We're not talking about putting hydrogen in most vehicles, and we're not talking about putting hydrogen in power plants.
So the most important part, right, is about matching the use case with the storage technology, right? All the trade-offs that you've talked about are important when you think about how to align what's the best use for hydrogen. Hydrogen is an amazing storage medium, but it doesn't make sense for every use application. I think everybody in the room here would think about where is hydrogen the most effective, where is the most safe sort of application for hydrogen. I think from a technology standpoint, right, I get to think as an R&D director today, not as a political operative or a environmentalist or anything like that. I think about from the technology standpoint, what is hydrogen best suited to do? And that's a hard question to answer, right? It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of modeling, a lot of discussions across those industry verticals that use hydrogen, education around the safety. There's still a lot of challenges to even just transport hydrogen around the state. I was in a meeting the other day, and you wouldn't believe it, but you can't drive a hydrogen tanker truck through a tunnel in the New York City area. That's seen as a pretty difficult thing to do. And until we can start thinking about all of the impacts of how we would use hydrogen, including transportation, including safety, including the trade-off analysis around what's its best use, I think it would be important to keep all of the potential uses on the table until we can have broader discussions about how best to use hydrogen. And the point about kind of clean hydrogen and colors of hydrogen, I find them really confusing. I don't know if we did a show of hands, how many people know the difference between pink and gray and black hydrogen? It's incredibly challenging to keep it straight. Like I'll make another joke. about my daughter, right? It's kind of like when you look at the Crayola crayon box and you have the cornflower blue. What kind of hydrogen is that, right? It's very difficult. So what we usually talk about is clean energy using electrolysis to generate hydrogen. It's very clear what we're trying to do, right? We take offshore wind, we run it through an electrolyzer, and we create hydrogen. And I think the color coding, right? When I first heard the word blue hydrogen, I thought, oh, that must come from conventional hydro, but it can't be farther from the truth, right? So I feel like the colors are confusing. And within my team, I always say, hey, let's not use the colors, let's be really specific. Where's the hydrogen coming from? So I think New York's really lucky that we have a tremendous history in conventional hydropower. The first hydropower station was built right at Niagara Falls when we first said, hey, how are we gonna harness this amazing power? And our entire industrial manufacturing revolution was built on water power. Somebody mentioned Rochester, New York, that's where I'm from. And when you walk down the streets in that district where there's actual water runs, where the factories used to run on water and the ability to generate energy is core to what made New York what it is. If you look at the canal system in the 1800s and transporting goods in water and generating energy and transporting goods is just part of what New York is all about. So I think putting all that on the table and reacting to a little bit about the color codes and things like that, I think it's going to be a longer term process to discuss what hydrogen is best suited for, and it's something that we're working through with a tremendous number of partners to make sure we're listening and collecting feedback from every point of view, if you will.
If I may, I recommend people check out the Hydrogen Science Coalition. These are veteran users of the molecule, mostly manufacturing for decades, and you're going to start to see why using the renewable electricity directly. So,
I guess, well, no, you did a great job with the answer. I guess the only thing I would add is just for people, this is confusing, as Craig discussed, the color codes are crazy. But the other thing that's confusing is that once you get off the color codes, that's just how you made the hydrogen. Then it's how you used it. And how you used it also has a whole range. I mean, you can do good things with molecules and do bad things with molecules, even with water. I mean, you can drown in water or you can shower in water, right? So you can do a lot of different things. So it's very important you understand the whole piece of it and you're open-minded and really think through the whole piece of it. I would also encourage that we have Capture the Energy, our conference in May 24th to 26th, the investment conference, and we have a very nice session on this as part of that conference, so it's a perfectly good chance to kind of get grounding and all that. And there are, in my personal opinion, very great applications for clean hydrogen and terrible applications, and you just have to sort through them.
And can I make another joke about hydrogen, actually? I find that it behaves just like a gas. It tends to take up as much room as you give it, right? And I'd hate to have this conversation be dominated by hydrogen and what we're going to do about it, especially when we're here to talk more about batteries and things. But yeah, it's this funny thing at work, we always joke, the more hydrogen comes out, the more we end up talking about it. It fills the entire volume of the space that we give it. So.
Let me reel it back in, though, and focus in a little bit about batteries. Professor Whittingham made some, I think, very interesting and cogent remarks about building batteries and building supply chains that are resilient and frankly building them that are a little bit closer to the users, to us. It actually, the topic came up at dinner last night, and frankly, maybe you could make some remarks with regard to a domestic supply chain and frankly how complicated the supply chain really is.
Yeah, I think that is a very important topic for the US to really think about, and I think the current administration is doing a very good job of it. So I think you heard Professor Whittingham say there are lots of factories that are being announced, but those are dominated by Asian manufacturers, and they are bringing their workforces and their know-how to set up these factories. And then also the supply chain, a lot of that comes from Asia and Europe. And so the US is lacking not only in terms of developing its own lithium-ion manufacturing, but also the ancillary supply chain that support that manufacturing is lacking quite a bit. And we are actually facing that ourselves. So we are very proud that we have our own technology that we developed in this building, and we are utilizing that to set up a commercial gigafactory. yet we suffer quite a bit from the supply chain challenges because you don't have, and we do make a unique cell which is a prismatic form factor. So in the US, I think Tesla really promoted cylindrical cells, and there's some maybe local cylindrical cell supply chain that got that got developed. But for prismatic cells, I think we do see a lot more challenges in terms of working with local suppliers and how to encourage them to start investing their money and time into building that up. But it's very needed for the country to become energy resilient and energy independent. So I'll even take a recent example, the war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is utilizing natural gas as a way to keep getting finances into the country. So I think there is a very interesting time in our history where we are transitioning our energy source. It used to be very oil-based, and the world obviously saw that oil comes from a handful of nations, and that independence that they could have had was missing. And so there are lots of challenges that come about with you not having control of your own energy source. So I think with this transition to clean energy, sun shines different ways, but sun shines everywhere in the world, and you have wind that flows everywhere in the world too. So now, as the world is transitioning to clean energy, I think many people are realizing that we should have control of our own energy source, and so sun and wind, which is shining and flowing everywhere, could be utilized combined with battery storage to promote that clean energy, but also energy resilience and energy independence into the country. So I think very important topic and many people, many countries are putting in the efforts. US is also headed in the right direction now, but we need a lot more support and a lot more emphasis in developing that supply chain within the country.
Most people don't really realize how dominant the Chinese position has become in batteries. We talk a lot about the gigafactories, and we understand that there are a lot of gigafactories in China. But what I think most people don't realize is, and what was you just pointed out, is that when a lithium molecule is sourced from South America, it generally goes to China, gets processed there. Then it gets turned into something, the next step, and then it comes back, even for a gigafactory in the United States, comes back to the United States to be put into a battery. They have created a very dominant position in the early part of the supply chain. One of the things in the Liebridge meeting with the DOE was kind of the mindset of, we do not want to be in the position Germany is with Russia and natural gas right now. And that is exactly the position we're in with China right now with batteries. We really need to create this supply chain from at least friendly, allied, aligned countries. As Stan pointed out, it probably isn't just US. Australia, Canada have phenomenal mineral resources. There's a lot to be done here. But the important point, I think, from an economic development point for the Southern Tier, is that the idea of putting 4 or 5 gigafactories in here also brings an incredible ecosystem. And that incredible ecosystem comes both downstream, and starting with cell factories, in my eyes, is really the right point, because that does the pull on both sides. It does the pull through the supply chain and gets that intermediate supply up. And it also gets to the gentleman's question before about recycling, closing the loop all the way to the further end. So by driving for these cell factories here and driving for that leapfrogging technology for those cell factories here, we can pull through that entire supply chain in the United States. And right now is the right time, because the federal government's really ready to make those investments.
I think we're just about out of time, unless there were somebody with a real pressing question. One in the back, yeah. Last question.
Thank you. So my question is about this supply chain about lithium. If lithium is a problem, I mean, what about sodium? Because for stationary storage where energy density is not the problem, how about using maybe sodium so that we can just put a tank of battery anywhere? So have you thought about that, and what is the technology? At which point is the technology right now about sodium?
I think the question was around sodium ion technology and how relevant maybe that is. Sodium ion is becoming or is generating quite a bit of a buzz in the industry right now. But over the course of this transition, I would say And in my 13 years, I would say there are many other technologies that have also created some buzz coming from the lab scale. But there is a tremendous amount of effort that is needed to change from what you see at the lab to really make it be a commercial ready technology. And like I said, in 13 years, sodium ion is right now, but in 13 years that I've spent in this industry, I've seen many a technology make that buzz. So the transition that we are seeing right now with lithium ion particularly, there's been a lot of push globally to develop the supply chain, to make sure those molecules are available, to make sure there's some refinement of that, the infrastructure is available, such that ultimately it can be finally deployed in a commercial application. So sodium ion does show some promise in terms of a technology that can be developed, and there are some companies that are definitely focusing on it, but I think it's several years, if not decades away, in actually becoming a technology that can be deployed in commercial applications. So yeah.
And I just want to make sure people aren't left with the opinion that lithium-ion is a problem in itself. The lithium-ion technologies, lithium can be sourced from many, many places in the world. In fact, mostly not China. It just happens to go to China for processing. So you know, we can have a thriving, and I think we will have a thriving lithium-ion business with sodium. Certainly, maybe a step after that, but we certainly will have a thriving lithium-ion business.
Okay, I'd like to thank our panelists for